Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Steel Target Paint Podcast. I'm Jeff Jones, and of course, my partner on this podcast is...
Hey, I'm Steve Foster, everybody. How are you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing great, Steve. You been able to shoot much?
Oh, absolutely. You know why that is, don't you, Jeff?
You've got ammo.
I don't know.
That's it. You've got ammo and you've got guns. That's got to be it, right?
And I'm not sure if our guest knows. Does he know?
I don't know.
You can tell him, Jeff.
Do you know the running joke on? Okay, but for everybody who's watching the video, if you haven't already figured it out, and for those listening, we have a very special guest with us today, Scott Volquartsen from Volquartsen Firearms. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So, do you know what the running joke on our podcast is? Have you?
I do not.
It's that Steve has a home range and I don't.
I just want to make sure you know, Scott, because everybody else does.
Okay. Now, the absolute funniest moment on this podcast was I'd gotten a package. I'd gotten a Weiland chassis, and Steve engraved it for me, and I opened it up and I put it together. But there was this little vial. It looked like copper shavings in it, and I'm like, what is this? And long story short, one of the guys that trained with Steve and Steve concocted this idea, and they actually sent me part of Steve's home range. So I didn't
want him to be left out. You know, do you blame me?
Well, at least he was thinking of you.
Yeah, I have part of, and of course, like I joke that what Steve doesn't know is when he wasn't looking, I left a little part of myself in the back corner of his range. So we're even.
Scott, I don't think he's kidding either.
Hopefully that's not what he put in the vial and sent back to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Scott, I thought that was our secret.
Well, let's get right into what we're talking about here. Steve, you reached out to Scott and got him on a podcast, and there was a big reason why you'd hoped he'd come on. Why don't you take it from here and let our listeners know what's going on? And for everybody, before Steve picks up, we are video recording this podcast. It will be on the rangestore.net YouTube channel if you want to see their great looking faces and my ugly mug. So you can go there.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. That's why people tune in, Jeff, just to see you, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, our listeners may go down since we're doing the video, but we'll have to do the analysis after all this. So. Well, I've known Scott for a few years. I used to shoot with one of his team shooters over here in Griffin, and I've met Scott a couple times, but out in SHOT Show and at the NSSF, now the Rimfire Challenge World Shoot. And I've got a pretty long commute for the last couple of years to and from work. I drive about an hour one way, an hour and a half the other way, and so I'm always looking for podcasts and certainly have a pretty good social media presence. So I saw Scott post that he's got a new podcast called No Excuse to Miss, Volquartsen Firearms. I was like, what is this all about? And Jeff, I listened to, I think he's got 2 episodes, there's a teaser kind of episode, but there was 2 episodes out, and it was exceptional, and it wasn't just about firearms per se. It wasn't, hey, try this Volquartsen Mamba because it's great. It wasn't about any of that whatsoever, which I thought was really, really interesting. So he's had a couple of really cool guests on that really just sucked me into the story. So I reached out to Scott, and we've talked several times about, Scott's leadership and presence in the firearms industry. Anytime that I've reached out to Scott for, supporting some matches or any matches that I'm go to, Scott, more so than a lot of companies, he may not be at every single match, but he does a fantastic job giving back to the community. And so the Steel Target Paint family really appreciates that. So glad to have you on, Scott. Let's dive a little bit into your podcast. Talk to the listeners that haven't heard about it yet. What you want to accomplish with the podcast and when they can go find it at.
Okay. I'm a big fan of podcasts. I'm like you, that anytime I'm in the car, I'm listening to different podcasts from all genres, trying to find whether I can learn something, be entertained, whatever it might be. So I decided I want to do a podcast, but you're right. I didn't want to do it just about, here's our latest finish we're putting on this compensator.
Right.
You know, there's a time and place for that, but they can go to our website and we can do, you know, different marketing things around that. What I wanted to do with the podcast was bring on people who I found interesting. We've been able to make some great connections and network with some, you know, people with great stories over the last 10, 15 years. So I wanted to bring them on, and a lot of them have stories related back to, you know, I met them through the shooting industry,
Sure.
but they might not on the surface look like what we would consider as a quote unquote industry insider.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's a, you know, and I always talk about, like, I love being involved in the competition world, you know, watching, you know, you guys shoot, watching our shooters, and just the whole camaraderie that shooting community brings. But I think to the outside world, there's a gap that we can bridge, because before I ever went to my first match, which was probably 10, 12 years ago, it can be like a very intimidating thing if you don't know what's going on.
Oh, most definitely.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So that's where I thought, you know, if we can kind of bridge that gap between like the recreational shooter, the competition shooter, you know, the shooter that may not look like what we a lot of times envision a shooter to look like, and then hear their stories and just see how they got to where they're at now. Because I've said this on a couple different podcasts. One of the biggest mistakes I made when I kind of got involved with running our company is I would always hear like other people's advice and different things, and I'd always shut it out thinking, well, our industry is different or our business is different. And the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that it's all business is pretty much similar. It's a matter of connecting with people. And so that's what I wanted to do with the podcast, is kind of, you know, bridge that gap and just connect with different people. And, you know, I've learned a lot from listening to different podcasts. So try to maybe bring some of our customers, listeners into and allow them to learn from the same people.
Sure. Sure.
That's great. So what's the name of the podcast, Scott?
It's called No Excuse to Miss.
No Excuse to Miss. And where can people find this?
It'll be on all the platforms. We initially had it out on, so we released the first couple episodes, and then we had an issue where it wasn't being pushed to all the different platforms. So at that point, our marketing director and myself decided, okay, let's turn this over to the professionals and let them handle that part of it, the production part, pushing it out and all that stuff. Because for better or worse, I don't know if it's a strength or a weakness, but when I do something, I go all in on it. So I'm like, if we're going to do this, I want it to be kind of like the same mindset we use with our products, where I'm going to go all in on it and want it to be the best product we can put out there. And the only way we could do that, because I didn't realize how much time, like the editing,
Oh yeah.
Oh, ask Steve about our first episode.
Oh yeah.
We've been lucky. We've gotten better over the years, but I think Steve spent twice as long as we recorded editing it, because most of the podcast was
So Scott, how I curbed that behavior is I started charging him $5 for every that he said, and I was good. All right, carry on. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, because my thinking was, okay, we record the podcast, we download it, we push it out, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
But after doing even just a couple episodes, you know, I was informed that there's a whole lot more that goes on the back end. And probably a lot of it is taking my ums and ands and all that out of it. So in a couple weeks, it'll be pushed to all the platforms again. We are switching services that does that for us, because our goal is we want to be able to do like a weekly podcast.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And it was just going to be too much especially as we get into the fall and we get into our busy time with SHOT Show around the corner at that point. It was going to be too much for our guys to be able to do all the production and editing on that in a timely fashion.
Right.
No, most definitely. I mean, this is the one thing, and it sounds like your podcast is similar to ours in that it's a podcast of passion. You're not looking at getting, I mean, you wouldn't turn away 1 million listeners, but you're not trying to get 1 million listeners. This is about just getting information out to the community and enjoying doing it. And that's why Steve and I do this one. It's just about, we get to talk to cool people like yourself, and we get to talk shooting and joke around with each other and just have fun and realize that that's what we do. And now from your perspective, I mean, the firearms business is an industry. It's your livelihood. And again, but we always go back to what Steve and I do: shooting steel challenge, shooting some USPSA rimfire challenge. It's just a game, and so there's a different perspective there. Neither one's right or wrong. But again, I think when you do something that you're passionate about, as you pointed out with, going all in, it's enjoyable. No matter how hard it is, it's enjoyable,
And I think that's something that, especially in our industry, sometimes we forget is what got us into the shooting to start with, is it being fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the politics and the, sometimes there, different drama at different matches. But I think sometimes it requires us to take a step back and be like, even a bad day on the range is better than most other days.
Yeah, for sure.
And so a lot of times that's what we even try to, convey in our marketing is it is fun. And especially with us doing rimfires, it can be fun for the new shooter, for, whoever it may be. It doesn't have to be so serious and intimidating. Which is why, like, the rimfire challenge, when it first came about, was great for us because it did allow us to get involved with a lot of new shooters. And now, like, especially like the steel challenge, it's crazy some of the times that these guys have practiced and worked on and been able to put down. It's
ridiculous.
I'll tell you a funny story talking about that. They just had the Area 5 Steel Challenge Championships, and I go to practice score and I pull up the scores, and there's one of the top shooters, Grant Kunkel, and it's got a score as a 46. And I'm like, oh my God, why we got to get it. And then I looked and they threw it out. So it was only a 7-stage match. There was no outer limits. I'm like, okay.
Well, I think it was after the world match though that he said that he thinks he can go under 50.
Yeah.
It's
it's crazy. And let's throw a little props at now one of your employees, but definitely one of your sponsored shooters, and what Colby Pavlock has done over the years. I'm writing an article, and I won't allude to the article, but he actually won 6 world championships as a junior.
Yeah.
And there were actually not enough junior shooters to give him the junior championship as well. He just he just got the world championship, no big deal. But and I think he blew everybody's mind. And I actually wanted to ask you about this. I think he blew everybody's mind. Steve, was it last year or 2 years ago where he came to the match with the fully adjustable Volquartsen stock that weighed like 37 pounds?
Is that all it weighs? I thought it was more. Yeah, I first.
Scott, I'm kidding, and I am, and I'm a kidder, but it is one of the heavier stocks.
A lot of people shoot. It is. It may feel like 37 pounds compared to what everybody else is shooting.
Yes. So, and that was actually one of your precision stocks, because I've seen similar stocks like that on your website before, and it seemed like it was more for a precision shooting discipline than it would be, say, a steel challenge.
Yeah, that's one of our bench rest stocks, and he was still living in Idaho when he asked for us to send that to him. And I thought when we did it, he was just building up a bench rest rifle just for, to go out and shoot. I never expected him to compete with that.
Right.
And it was funny the first time he brought that, because a lot of people are like, well, there goes your chance of winning. And it didn't take him long, and they're like, wow.
Oh, crap.
Then we had other people, they're like, do I need to go heavier? I'm like, I don't think that means you have to go heavier. It does tell me a lot, though, that a lot of times people may spend too much time tweaking equipment when they could spend well, not now with ammo, but instead of spending more time on the range like he does, or he did back in the day, they spend so much time analyzing and going over equipment. I think by him doing that, he basically proved that if you have talent and you put work in, it doesn't always have to be the lightest or the latest product that's out there.
Steve and I have talked about this, and you can't buy your game. You can't buy your game. You can buy quality, which will help your game. Okay. There are definitely, and we're not going to disparage any platforms out there, but there are definitely some manufacturers that don't produce a gun that's going to go bang every time. Okay. And there are ammo manufacturers that don't produce ammo that's going to go bang every time. So you can buy quality, but you can't turn a B shooter into a master or a grandmaster by putting a $3,000 gun in their hand.
And Colby reminds me of that all the time, that I am the perfect example of that. He's like, you have access like to what he goes, you have
that doesn't sound like something you would say.
Oh no, not at all.
Not Colby. No, not at all. I get a kick out of it with Colby at the matches now, because I look at him and I go, how's it feel to be an old guy?
I just need to get a couple kids.
That's what I like about being, like, he's so good natured, we can go back and forth.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, let's face it, he can kick my butt on any day of the week on any range we step on. But when he came back from the world speed shoot and I saw that some other kids had beat him, I'm like, so were you shooting a single shot down there? Or I said, what was going? And he still finished like third or fourth or whatever. But he's like, really, Scott? I'm like, well, I'm just asking. So the running joke in the shop is, when's he going to build his next mechanical division rifle?
Hey, you know what's funny? I just sold him a centerfire revolver.
Yeah, and that's why I asked him. I said, you can't compete with the fast kids anymore. You got to switch to revolver.
Wait a minute. And the 929, Steve? You sold him the 929?
Yeah.
I told him at Worlds you had that gun and might be interested in selling it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You should have saw the desperation in his face. I mean, he got like a nothing place trophy or plaque. I think it was, I don't know. I don't even know what it was. It was like a keychain maybe they gave him, and maybe a participation. I don't know, Colby, what was it? So anyway, he said, man, you got a revolver? I'm like, well, you got Poggi out there. And okay, well, yeah, I got one. He said, man, I'm thinking I'm going to start shooting that. I said, man, these kids are getting kind of fast, aren't they? And he started going on and on. I said, brother, I'm 44. What do you think I have to wake up to every day? But no, that's pretty funny. So it's interesting. Let me back up to the chassis. So the first time I saw it was at the 2019 World Rimfire match. I saw Colby post a picture of it on social media. I'm like, Colby, man, let me check out that chassis or stock. He's like, man, it's kind of heavy. I'm like, yeah, okay. I picked that thing up. I said, what's this thing made out of tungsten? He's like, oh no. He says, I would say it, but it's a G-rated show. I said, how much does it weigh? He said 8 pounds. And I said, baloney. But so it's interesting that one of the frustrations, because I do work with a lot of shooters and a lot of junior and kids and stuff like that. And one of the biggest issues that we have is getting a stock to fit the kids. And so I've got a partnership with Weiland USA, and they make my, Falcon compensator and what have you. And so Todd said, hey, we need to build a chassis. And, of course I saw Colin's mod shot. I held, I think, the first one back at the 17 or 18 US steel shoot. And I told Todd, I said, here's what's missing in the marketplace. You've got a heavy, highly adjustable one for the bench rest guys. And you've got a mod shot that's really, really light. But here's the problem. It's a one size fits all. You need to make something adjustable. And so that's where, by seeing Colby stock and Todd wanting to produce something light, that's where we collaborated. And I'm just thankful that I had some input into the Weiland chassis. That's why it's got that buffer tube that moves up and down, because, I've got a little bit more of a full cheek over here than some people do. And, I've got short, stubby little fingers. And so, you can move the grip forward and stuff like that. But I think, pushing that level of innovation really, really helps the overall community for sure.
I completely agree. And I think even, if you look at like a young kid or a teenager that might be shooting, it's nothing. They could grow 2 to 3 inches from one season to the next.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can't always go out there and, everybody's circumstances are different. You can't always afford to go buy a brand new stock or, upgrade the equipment every single season because your son or daughter has grown.
Yep.
Where something like that allows it to adjust with them, which I think is great.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure.
And, that's kind of the one thing that's, I always find even interesting, like at matches, is even though there's a lot of competitors and competing businesses, I don't ever get the feeling like there's a lot of like, oh, I can't show them that because what if they do something?
Yeah.
Where I always take it as, if I see something better than what we have, is I don't ever want to like copy that. But how can that spur us on to come up with something better or different? So like you said, it helps with the innovation all the way around.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there may be
otherwise
aspects of the industry that are very cutthroat when it comes to firearm manufacturers or even just equipment suppliers to the industry, but everybody seems to be like at the vendor areas or that everybody plays nice. And actually one of the ones that I find very interesting is that Brian, this is Brian Conley from Hunters HD Gold,
yes,
has actually struck up a friendship with the guy that runs Rudy Project. And you could look at them and go, they're highly competitive, and Brian's like, we don't consider that. And they actually find themselves very complimentary. So that's great to see,
Outside of, we don't want anybody, no competitors in steel target paint business, but everything else, fair game.
Well, if the matches keep using or try to keep spending money on the Walmart, what I call skim milk in a can, and then they get a can of steel target paint, they're never going to want to go back. So
yeah.
Well, and I've told people that, it seems like white paint should be white paint.
Mhm.
When you go out and spray a target, or spray a plate, but it definitely is not. There's a big difference. I will give you guys that.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk a little bit about, Scott. We've talked a little bit about this a couple of years ago. Could you share your company's philosophy or your philosophy around sponsorship? Just number one of matches, and then we get questions all the time. As a team captain, steel target paint shooting team. Hey Steve, what are you looking for to be on your team, and so on and so forth. And we, bring in a lot of families into the sport, and we've got plenty of world champions to go around, but that's not the only thing that we look for. Can you talk through us a little bit about what your philosophy on number one, match sponsorship, what you look for on individual sponsorship with people?
So our big thing is, like, when it comes to match sponsorship, is, obviously the bigger the match, you're always looking at the numbers, but what we like to see is when somebody emails us or reaches out, whether they have 25 shooters planning on attending or 300 shooters, how organized are they in what we're going to get in return for our sponsorship?
Sure.
And I know that a lot of the match directors, it's all volunteer and it's a lot of time on their end. But sometimes if we get a sponsorship request that just says, hey, whatever you can send, to us, I realize they're trying to just do whatever they can, but to us, it's like, well, how much effort are they doing on their end?
Right.
Where I would rather have it be, for X amount of dollars, here's what you get. For this amount, you get this. Even if it's we'd be willing to spend a little more money on those because we know in advance of what we're going to get.
Yeah, for sure.
And when it comes to sponsored shooters, the biggest thing that we've found is, we obviously get a lot of requests. People, how do we get on your team? How do we do this? The majority of the people that I've ever shot for is we've reached out to them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is when I start going to matches, is part of the reason we don't like to set up a vendor tent at times is I like to walk around and watch everybody shoot. And I'll watch I want to see, how does, somebody that's that's having a great match or a super talented shooter, how do they respond when they just had a horrible stage? Whether it be equipment, shooter,
Yes.
whatever the reason, how do they respond to other shooters? How do they walk off that stage as? Because to me, it's super easy to get along with when you're winning and everything's going well. But how are you going to respond when something doesn't go well? You know, and
For sure.
I've said this a million times. I'm as competitive as anybody, and I want our guns to win. But I want our shooters to represent us in a positive light more so than I want them to win.
100%.
We've talked
because
with a number of companies and a number of big name sponsored shooters, and it all comes down to it can be boiled down to one simple sentence. You get noticed for your shooting. You get on a team because of your attitude.
100%, yes.
And it's just, I mean, you just go down the line and everybody says that. Even the people who are sponsored shooters, they even say, and I'm talking Max Michel, JJ Racaza, all these guys are said, you know, I got noticed because how I shoot, but I got on a team because they believed in my attitude and I believed in their product.
That's a great point, because, you know, if you win everything, you're obviously going to get noticed. But if you have a terrible attitude and you're wearing our logo, that gets noticed that much more too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And people subliminally tie those two together, you know, because we can't be at every match. I don't know, it'd be great if we could, but we can't. So a lot of times these guys are representing our company, our brand, our culture, whatever it might be. And, you know, back in the day when we first got into this, we sponsored a girl named Allie Barrett.
Mm-hmm. I remember Allie.
I would get emails from people that said my daughter went up and asked her a question and she spent a half hour with them. I'm like, so even if at that time that family's not ready to buy his daughter who's just getting into shooting one of our products, it's been welcoming to that new shooter, and now she wants to keep working at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and maybe down the road they become a customer, maybe not. But if nothing else, you know, you've made that little girl's day and they have a positive outlook or a positive memory of being at that match. You know, because there's a lot of downtime at some of these matches. You're only shooting so many, you know. Well, in my case, I get to shoot longer because it takes me longer. But
I was going to say, Steve shoots, you know, it's a 4-hour match. Steve shoots under a minute. I shoot a little over a minute, you know, so we're getting more money or more bang for our buck for our money
Yes.
for what we pay for the match because we're spending more time shooting.
Yeah, you know, I like to take my time when it's my turn.
I'm going to use that.
So there's a lot of downtime and a lot of, you know, going back and forth and talking to people where, to me, you have to, no matter how your match is going, you have to be willing to sit there and put on that happy face or whatever you want to call it. Because for some of these young kids, or even if it's a adult, for new shooters, this might be the only match they're going to go to. And if they have a bad experience, they may be like, well, that's why I never went in the first place. That's what I thought,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Where if they have a great experience and they feel like they can talk to one of the top level shooters, you know, they may be hooked for life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Steve, do you have a Volquartsen firearm story? Because I've got a good one, and it's
Volquartsen firearm story.
Yeah,
I've got a couple of those, but
okay.
I'm interested to hear what you got up
So
your
this
sleeve.
is going back a couple of years, and I'm heading to a match, and I'm practicing the day before, and the gun I was shooting breaks, and I've got a backup gun, and I'm like, okay, I'll just shoot that gun. And for the record, the gun that broke wasn't a Volquartsen. And so I get up to the match.
That was a close one,
Yeah.
Jeff. God's like, oh, look at the time.
No.
Thanks,
So I get to the match, and I'm rooming with Kurt Omensetter, and Kurt's a great guy. And I'm looking at the schedule, and I'm like, hey, Kurt, you got a Scorpion, don't you? He goes, yeah. I said, well, my open gun broke. When do you shoot open? He goes, I'm shooting open on Sunday. I said, oh man, can I shoot your gun on Saturday? He's like, sure. And so I shoot his gun, and we were, oddly enough, at the time we were both in the same class, and I beat him with his own gun, and I went home, and that I got home on Sunday night, and I think by Tuesday I had my own Scorpion ordered. So I was going to say, we just lost your video there, Scott.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
No, so I got my own Scorpion, and that is actually still, this is now what, probably 4 years later, still the Scorpion that I shoot when I shoot rimfire pistol open. And it's run like a workhorse. I'm not going to lie. There's been a broken spring here or there. And after 4 years, that's expected. And here's the best part. I call up customer service, and it's like, hey, I got this spring broken or this spring broken. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, okay, how much? And they're like, it's a spring. We'll send one to you. It's a spring. I mean, it's not like I'm asking for a brand new bolt or anything like that. And so, and that's another thing too, is that is a company that stands behind their product, and isn't just going, oh, well, that broke. And, even if it shouldn't have broke, I mean, that they stand behind it, and they know their guns too. I had an issue with some ammo, and it was recommended to change the recoil spring, because that ammo was too light for the recoil spring I had in there. And this was early on in my career, where I knew, point it that way and pull that thing, and hopefully you make something go ting. And and they were great, and they're like, oh yeah, just change out this spring and you'll be fine. So it was refreshing. So Scott, I just wanted to share that with you, because it's a cute little story. Absolutely.
And that's the one thing that I go back to, the camaraderie with the shooting competitors is, in a lot of other sports, they're not going to let you borrow their competition. In golf, you're not going to loan your clubs to somebody else that might beat you. But you hear of that a lot of times in shooting, where, oh yeah, use this, or try this one, use this one. And and from our standpoint, like with the broken springs and stuff like that, that's the selfish aspect that we love about competition shooting, is it gives us more feedback that we can get ourselves on the range.
Yeah.
Because more rounds are going to go down range. And I'm not saying this is your case, but there's a lot of people that decide they never ever are going to clean their competition guns, which it gives us awesome feedback that we can keep working from.
No.
So
I think I can speak for Steve and myself that I might be a little more anal than he is about cleaning my guns, but we're both.
That's probably true. Scott, Zach Grubb?
Yes.
He shoots Scorpions, and he was talking about, hey Steve, how often do you? Because I've got a couple of Scorpions. He says, man, how often do you clean blah blah blah? And I said, well, I just get a couple new guns every year, man. What's this cleaning crap you're talking about? And he thought I was kidding.
When Cheyenne Dalton used to shoot more competitively, more matches when she was a little bit younger.
Yeah.
Once a year, we would get a box with all her competition guns.
Oh, yeah.
That would just have a little note in there, please clean.
I thought the note would say, help me.
Yeah. Our guys would start taking it apart and take the comps off and start cleaning it and start sending pictures of just the residue and the buildup that would come out of her guns.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd just be like, well, that's why I sent them to you. Thank you.
Well,
Nice.
and I'm going to share this, and you may believe it. I think, coming from the industry, for me, cleaning a gun isn't always about just cleaning the gun. It's also about inspecting it and looking for anything that may be failing. And so you can find it when you're not on the range, so you don't have a problem when you're on the range.
For sure.
But here's the other great line I used to use, or still use, and you were talking about how in this community we all share our guns, and I personally believe that the male shooters in this sport could be likened to male peacocks. because we paint our guns and we can't wait to have them all looking fancy and the feathers are all flashy and we can't wait. I mean, we will not only let somebody borrow the gun, but we'll give them ammo to shoot our gun and
for sure.
And
force
then we'll
it
take
upon them.
pictures of them and we'll put it on social media of this person shooting my gun.
Yes. Joe Schmo won, but he won with my gun.
Man, you mentioned it. Hang on a second. Hang on. I know I can pull up this picture pretty quick. So I put out a picture on Instagram. I'm not as famous as Scott Volquartsen is, but I'm working on it, Jeff. Hang on. It's right. Oh, is that on it? Hang on. So I posted a picture of one of my pretty guns that I laser engraved. It's not a Scorpion. It's a CWA. And where's the picture? Anyway, no, I know how I can find it. Hang on. Jeff, tell a joke real quick, would you?
Oh, okay. Wait,
No,
just
hang
say,
on, hang
all you got to do is say Jeff talk.
But you mentioned CWA, and I'll say that was the one cool thing. We didn't have Rimfire Worlds last year because of obviously the world being shut down. But the year before, I was able to meet the guys from CWA, him and his grandson.
Yeah, Chet
and the Fox Boys.
Yeah. And I mean, I spent maybe a half hour sitting there talking to him. And I mean, in some ways we're competitors or whatever, but I'm like, just such a super guy. And the fact that he had his grandsons with him and it was awesome.
And that's really what drew me to CWA. I don't know if I shared the CWA story on this podcast before.
No.
Okay, so I'll tell that, and then I'll show you my my 30 seconds of fame. Thank you for telling that, Scott. So I was shooting a local match. It was in, I don't know, early 2017. It was right after, and kind of dovetails in the story with Scott, is I was shooting for another company that didn't make a full-blown firearm. And so I went up and shot the East Coast match, won a certificate. I had an exceptional match up there, won a certificate for, I don't know if it was all for a Scorpion or, a significant amount. And so I sent an email to Scott thanking him. And, he says, "Hey, Steve, whenever you get it, if you could let me know what you think of the gun and feedback." And I sent him some feedback, and, it's a fantastic product. So that was pretty cool because at that time I've never met, Scott Volquartsen, the owner of Volquartsen Firearms, that, because I knew Ron and Chase because we grew up, they grew up in this area as well. So I was familiar with the product, but that was really, really cool. So I was making some decisions on what I was going to do. And I had a conflict because of rifles, or at that point in time, I was kind of leaning towards, whether there was sponsorship or not. To be very frank, is I was going to shoot, Volquartsen Scorpions. And that's why I've got 4 of them now, but then I was going to also shoot a Volquartsen rifle, but I didn't time up because of my other sponsorship. But it was really cool at that time to get an email or Facebook message, and I actually looked back at it when I reached out to Scott to be on the podcast. I was like, man, that was pretty cool, Scott, to reach out like that. But we appreciate you guys supporting the sport. So, and the other reason why I think it's okay, because I posted in the Volquartsen group, because I did pick up a couple more Scorpions and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I was asking for feedback on cool colors because I'm the peacock. I love different colors. And I can engrave
Big
stuff.
Daddy, if you've ever seen the Big Daddy gun.
So I want it to be really, really cool. But one of the reasons why, outside of somebody was in need, so I helped them out with that. But, I've got a lot of folks that come here to train. I do a lot of training, and, not everybody, average CWA is somewhere right around $2,500. The average Scorpion's probably in that 13, 14, Mamba type range. Of course you can shop for deals and that kind of thing. And it's really a different platform. You want a double stack or you want a single stack, and both are fantastic guns. So that's why I try to have one of everything, but don't tell my wife that. But here's my 30 seconds of fame. So I posted this picture. I don't know if you can see that all that well.
Your video's delayed, Steve. So get it up there against the camera and just hold it for a second.
All right, I'm holding.
Drop it.
That's one of the reasons, Jeff. It's really tough. It's one of the things you have to deal with when you have a home range, is you get poor internet service. So, but anyway, hey, third world problems, right? So this is a picture of CWA, and there's AMG lap timers and Neely ammo and so on and so forth. But at the bottom, so Donald Trump Jr. liked my post, commented on it, started following me, and then started following CWA. So I'm famous now.
Nice. Nice. Oh, that's funny.
Sorry, but it's still a good one.
Unbelievable.
I know.
Donald Trump Jr.
God, I can't believe he comes back more for this weekly with me.
Well, Scott, I do have one more question. That's something that I've always been interested in to understand, and that is, Steve and I are competitive shooters. And so, we're looking at, your 22 long rifle offerings, both in pistols and rifles that are going to be for the game of speed. But you've also got 22 Magnum rifles that you create
Yes.
for, I'm assuming precision, as well as, hunting. And so, you know, um, the steel the shooting sports that Steve and I participate in, you might think are huge. You go to the World Speed Shoot and you go, oh my God, there's 637 guns and 260 people, and it's small in comparison to a lot of other sports. And and some of your other and that goes for there's a lot of things like that. I mean, we're probably there's probably more people that play chess in Central Park than shoot steel.
That's true.
Okay. So, but from a perspective, I mean, is your market share more in the 22 long rifle for the speed type of things, or is it more in the precision and plinking and hunting side?
The 17 HMRs and the 22 mags we build are more probably like small game on the hunting side.
Okay.
On the 22 LR side, it's become more and more, for a while it seemed like everything had gone speed. But now with some of the NRL 22 competitions and different things, some of the more precision stuff seems to be coming back in and becoming more popular. But the one thing that always surprises us is the number of just like, I call them backyard plinkers. And I don't say that negatively in any way, but people that'll spend $1,500 on a 22 and all they're going to do is go in their backyard. But a lot of it comes from, they may not be quote unquote competition shooters that are going to show up at the Steel Challenge match, but their buddies are coming over on Sunday afternoon and they want to beat them at all cost.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know what that feels like. I don't have a competitive bone in my body, so it's right in one ear and out the other.
The other thing that we've kind of learned over the past, 5-10 years, I assume my dad maybe knew this when he got into the rimfire market, is it seems like no matter what their preference is that they want to shoot, they've always had or learned on a 22. Yeah. And I'll have guys tell me that they have friends out at their range and they'll shoot the larger caliber stuff in the morning, have some fun, but then they break out the rimfires and they'll do that all afternoon. It's easier on the body. It's, not as much recoil. And typically, now's a bad time to talk about ammo, but most times you can do it very inexpensively because the ammo is so much less.
Hey, listen, if you can find 22 or 9, the 22 is still cheaper than the 9 or the 45
yes.
or the 223. So in comparison, it's still a less expensive venue to shoot 22.
And we had a guy the other day, he asked me, he even said, he said, cause I said something about new shooters and he said, but nobody buys one of your guns as one of their first rimfires. And I said, you'd be surprised how many people, even if they're a new shooter that are relatively getting into it, they will buy that because they've seen, whether it be Colby or Nate Gibson or whoever it is, they've seen them and they knew that that's what they won with and that's what they want to start with. So and for us, well, I was just going to say, we had to shift our mindset a little bit that yes, there are new shooters that want to buy our stuff right away versus always thinking that the guy that's going to come buy ours is an experienced, been around the block type shooter.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we talked about on the previous podcast, Scott, was this exact topic. Jeff and I talked about all the mistakes that we've got in our gun safe. Some we've liquidated, but you mentioned it earlier. Sometimes you can only, to get into it, do what you can afford to do. And sometimes that's just buying a Ruger Mark IV. And, that's where companies like Tandem Cross help out with a couple of add-ons here and there to make it more competitive, more reliable. My feedback to anybody is do what you can afford. If you can afford a $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 Scorpion, or what, I know we're talking about pistols, or if you can buy a $2,500, $2,000, whatever CWA, there's a reason why the top shooters are shooting those. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of folks out there that are shooting these types of products that do not get free guns. They shoot them because they're the best out there. Even, and I won't go through some of the names, but a lot of folks that are out there shooting are not getting free guns. But what they're doing is they're buying what they can afford and what they perceive to be the best that they can afford. And there's so much wisdom in that. Don't get me wrong. I know $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 or $2,000 or $2,500 is a lot of money, but the amount of time that I've spent chasing springs around the gun room and all that kind of stuff, you know, I wish
it goes back to what we've talked about too, Steve. It's the reliability. You know, there's there is clearly the Scorpion took the Ruger architecture from a very solid architecture. There's nothing wrong with the Ruger architecture, but they refined it to a point where you get a much more precision weapon. I mean, that's how I look at it. And I've got a Volquartsen Superlight as well, and I feel the same way without that. Neither one of those, and of course, you know, everybody says my gun never fails, and if you're shooting 22, you're lying, because it's 22. Stuff's gonna happen. You're gonna get a misfeed. You're gonna get a misfire. Statistically, those guns have it way less than any other gun I've ever shot. And like I said, you can't buy your game, but you can buy reliability, and that's huge, especially in our game. You know, when you're only getting to throw away one string, and you know you get that one hiccup on a string, and it's not your fifth string, and you're going, you know, there's like a little pucker factor going. This gun gonna do it again, or am I gonna get through this stage?
Well, you know, and on our side, it's like walking around at a match and somebody will say, hey, so-and-so is looking for you. And you know they're shooting your gun. Yeah. And the first thing that goes to your mind is, uh-oh.
I got one more story. It's another Volquartsen story, and it's another great one. So one of my junior shooters started shooting a 22-45 Ruger bull barrel, and you know, stock. And you know, my first question to the father was, you know, do you love your daughter? And he went, of course I love her. I said, okay, I know you can't do it. You can't change the gun. I said, at least get her fiber optic front sights. So fiber optic front sights on that. And she shot that gun for about a year. And I told him, I said, she's ready to have a trigger upgrade. I said, she's getting better, and the trigger is holding her back. And so he got the Volquartsen kit, and we didn't tell her that we changed it. And so she got up to the line. I said, make ready. And are you ready? Stand by, beep. And she pulled the trigger. She pulled one shot, stopped. And the smile on her face was from ear to ear. She's like, what did you do to my gun? And her dad was there, and he's like, we fixed it, honey. and the gun ran great prior. It's just, again, you guys take the engineering to a refinement that really fits in with the competition. So that's another story I love to tell. And it falls into a lot with what Steve and we had a whole episode where we talked about, you know, you can buy inexpensive and you can upgrade, or as Steve pointed out, if you've got the money, you can get into one of these guns where you're not going to have to do all that, but you've got to have that money up front. And there's nothing wrong with either way. And there really isn't, you know, for a new shooter. You know, I tend to say, you know, if you know, you don't know if you're going to like this for the next year or 2 years or 5 years. So, you know, maybe investing in a lesser gun price is the better way to find out if you even like the game, you know.
Well, and sometimes I'll even tell people if they're not sure and they don't have the money to spend on a complete gun, I said, there's nothing wrong with starting with a factory gun, because you may not even know exactly what you're looking for yet.
Mm-hmm.
with the various options out there. But at least if you get started, then you can kind of adjust from there.
Yep.
But if money's holding you back from even getting started, it's impossible to know exactly what you want. So it's like you guys said earlier, start with what you can afford. Just get to the range and start working on your technique, your skill set. And then the more you get comfortable behind that trigger, the more you'll be like, okay, like with that little girl you were just talking about. So I can't afford a whole, a full custom gun yet, but guess what? I can put a trigger in and it'll completely change what I have now.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
The best part about that story is her grip is awesome because it had to be, and now, she went from about a 4.5 pound trigger pull to probably something, in the 2 range, and the gun doesn't move. So I looked at the dad and I said, well, maybe I'm going to make this a training technique. You're going to shoot a tougher gun to shoot for a year, and then we'll upgrade. So
it's too funny.
well, Scott, is there anything else you'd like to share with the the listening audience? We really appreciate you being on here. It's always
thank you
fun,
guys
like
for having me on. Yeah, we are, we're excited. Matches are taking place again. People are being able to get together, shoot again. We're looking forward to Rimfire Worlds in October. I wasn't able to make it down to World Speed, but definitely kept up on everything that was going on from our shooters. Even everything with Colby, not winning, so I can make fun of him.
Hang on, what's that say? You broke up. Say it one more. Say it one more time, Scott. I'm not sure if he heard you.
With Colby not winning, the funniest part about that though is he called one day. This is when he still lived in Idaho, and he's like, "Yeah," he goes, "I just don't have time to practice like I did, because he was going to school, he had a job." I'm like, "Oh, so life got in the way, huh?"
Welcome to adulthood, you punk.
Yes. But the thing that I will always as much crap as I give him, the thing that I will always compliment him on is, he had won like the World Rimfire for 4 straight years.
Yeah.
And when he got beat, it was by one of his teammates, Nate Gibson. And there wasn't, unless he's the best actor on earth, I know he was disappointed that he didn't win, but he was genuinely happy for Nate. And he sat there and, had just as much fun as if he had just won, which I think speaks a lot for a kid that at the time was 19 or 20 years old. So it's people like that we want to be associated with.
Yeah.
Win or lose, you're still having a good time. And, it's part of life. You're not going to win every match that you go to. And especially as you get older, there's going to be somebody younger, faster, but that doesn't mean you still can't have fun.
Yeah,
see, that's where I like where I am now, Scott, because I'm one of the faster old guys. And so I don't have to, Steve still kicks my butt and Nate kicks my butt and all the kids kick my butt, but I'll just hang out in the old guy category and see what I can do there. And
but I always tell those guys, they may be able to beat me, but they will never come up with more excuses than I can on a range.
Well, thanks so much, Scott, for being on with us. You do have a fantastic team. You've got Nate and Bryce and Cole and that Colby guy once slips by the goalpost every once in a while, but yeah, you've got a great group of representatives there. They're fantastic folks. And
shot with
most of them at the World Speed Shoot. Sorry, Bryce couldn't make it, and man, he told me why he couldn't make it. That was a bad deal.
Woo. Yeah, he's doing better though, and he shot he shot Area 3 not too long ago.
I saw that. He's back at it.
He's back at it, and probably learned a valuable lesson through all that.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Yeah, one that hopefully sticks with him too.
Yeah. It's easy to think we're invincible at that age, but
oh yeah, no, we know we were.
Yeah.
Now I'm over.
Yeah, well, thank you guys.
40.
I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
Right,
well,
so
Steve,
much,
we end these podcasts with you giving out the code for steel target paint for our people watching the video. I'm going to put it up there, but for the people listening, why don't you give them what that discount code is?
I'm just in awe of that high level of technology you just presented to our listeners. I mean, talk about best in class all for an hour. Yeah, was that crayon or was that a marker, Jeff?
It was
So,
a Sharpie.
Oh, really? Okay. Yep.
And it was written when you were talking with Scott as a last minute. Again, if we can't have fun on this, if I can't have a little fun, the old adage, if they're not laughing with me, but they're laughing at me, at least they're laughing. So
At least they're laughing.
At least it was a name brand marker. I was impressed. But if you want 10% off rangestore.net, go to ST Podcast 10. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.